What is the best thing you've heard a teacher say?
He said nothing. Wordlessly, Mr. Dalton just extended his chalk to me. 10th grade geometry was the high point of my math career. I really got it. Toward the end of the year, we were given a standardized T/F test of 25 questions about whether something could be proved or not. I ripped through 24 of them, except number 17. I spent 35 minutes on this one, until I finally could prove it was true. When we got back our test results, I got a 96, with number 17 being marked wrong. Mr. Dalton briefly went over the answers, and asked if anybody had any questions. My hand shot up, and I declared that the answer to number 17 was wrong. Surprised, he took a step toward me, and held out the chalk. 45 minutes later, as I dusted off my hands, everyone in the classroom agreed that the answer to number 17 was wrong. He copied down my proof and sent it to the Ivy League university that had made up the test. He changed my grade to 104, and gave everyone else credit for whatever answer they had marked for number 17. I had been given total respect by a teacher before the proof. He didn't have to say anything. Incredibly powerful moment in my life. I had a teacher hand me back an English composition paper that he had marked with a C, but no corrections. After class, I went up to him and asked him what I'd done wrong. "This isn't the best you can do. It was the best paper in the class, but you didn't put the effort into it that you might have. You can do better." I nodded. Technically, he was correct, it wasn't the best I could have done. So I told him why. "Sir, I work full-time. I live alone. I have a full class load. I eat, work, attend classes, and study. That's it. Would you tell me which of these areas I should short, to make more time for your class?" After a few minutes of close questioning, he turned to a shelf behind him, and pulled out 3 books on practical studying tips. "Your next paper is on these. Ignore the rest of the class, and focus on improving your study habits. You have 3 weeks. For the next 3 weeks, I did just that. I ignored the lectures, took no notes on the material, and didn't crack the textbook. Instead, I studied his beat-up old study guides. I learned better ways to take notes, how to do research, and other tricks and shortcuts. In the end, I wrote a paper, using what I'd learned, and handed it in. He asked for my notes, and I gave him those. He leafed through my paper, glanced at my notes, and handed it all back. "Don't come back to this class. You're done here," he said. I left, despondent. The next day, I got a note from the registrar. "You've been passed with top marks in Professor Wilson's class. So you have a free period for the rest of term," it read. So I'd have to say the best thing a teacher has ever said to me was, "Don't come back. You're done." Addendum: sorry, folks, but that was 45 years ago. I barely remember the school, much less the names of the texts. I'm sure the state of the art of studying has changed drastically. For instance, we were still using card catalogs in the library back then. My high school physics teacher started his course as follows: "If any of you came here expecting me to teach you anything, you might as well leave. Those of you who came here to learn should stay." This was the first time I clearly understood my education as being self-directed, rather than response to parental and teacher demands. I have never forgotten him or those words. I may even remember some of the physics, too. My name is Walt Cass, Dr. Walter Cass. I'm a liberal, a Democrat, and an agnostic. I'm married and have grown children. I've been a teacher for 30 years. I serve on the board of higher education in Boston. Holding up a book, I even wrote this book on education. This university requires that I give each of you grades. That assumes that I know more than you, when in fact, you each know much more than me about all sorts of subjects. But, if I don't turn in grades for each of you, I won't be doing my job, so you're going to decide collectively just how you'll be graded." Walt Cass and I remained friends long after I graduated, until his death. He remains one of the best teachers I ever had. Hi, my name is Dan Rasiki, I'll be your literature teacher, and please be warned that failing my class is very, very difficult. He became our favorite teacher within 15 seconds of us meeting him. Not because he had promised us an easy ride, but because the first thing he did was to kick every student's boogeyman out of his class. Here's where you might use a little bit of context. This was in Romania, in 1997, only 8 short years after the revolution that toppled the communist regime, and too soon for things to have had changed significantly. The communist education system used to give teachers virtually unlimited powers over their students, and many of them abused those powers in a myriad of ways, from not actually teaching students anything, that's why I don't know German, to grading them based on bribes or grudges, to being rude to them or even to physical violence. A history teacher I had used to smash the students' heads into the blackboard for not having had studied and once forced me to stay in class with a 40C/104F fever. And gave me a test too. Sure, these things weren't the norm, but to varying degrees, students were generally afraid of teachers. And here enters Mr. Rasiki, a 60-year-old man with one of those storyteller beards and a friendly and peaceful smile on his face, telling us we didn't need to fear him. Not only did he become our favorite teacher, but we noticeably studied more and tried harder in his class, because we really didn't want to disappoint him. He also had a fun quirk: he gave unique nicknames to each of his students. That way he wouldn't mix up any similar names. And he insisted that we sign our tests and assignments with our nicknames. I was class head back then, so I automatically became Sefa, which literally means the boss. He was a very interesting man. Besides being a teacher, he had also been a theater director, an activist, and he even did 4 years in prison for having organized some protests against communism. No wonder he was different from other teachers. Unfortunately, he died 4 years ago, but he did attend our class reunion 6 years ago, and we were very happy to see him again. I had no idea why my buddy told me I was lucky to have my Western civilization teacher. That all changed the first day of class. I had become an expert at junior college. Not that I was some genius, I just went there a lot. I figured this first day would be like all the other cookie-cutter first day of the semester overviews. Boy, was I wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats and listen up. As soon as you leave here today, I want you to apply for as many credit cards as you can get approved for, borrow money from your family, work extra jobs, sell drugs, kidding, but take all that money, buy a plane ticket, and go to Europe immediately. You could have heard a pin drop. We were bolted to our seats. You know why? Because when you finish college, have a career, start a family, and have a mortgage, you'll be too busy. You'll wish you would have done it sooner, and you'll never have the time. You'll wish that you did it right now. We were all calculating our get to Europe immediately strategies, and that opening monologue was just a preview of an incredibly engaging classroom experience. Every lesson was told as if it were a pitch for a movie, we became engrossed in each character, and it was the closest thing I've experienced to Robin Williams' character in Dead Poets Society. I'm happy to say that I eventually made it to Europe on my honeymoon, and we paid for the trip without borrowing any money. There came a time in my life when my learning curve became very steep. I learned so much in such a short time that I was reading 2 grades ahead of my regular class. At school, I was continuously bored with lectures because, hey, I had already done everything. And as my knowledge increased, so did my arrogance. I started getting into heated debates with my teachers. I knew more than them, and I was eager to show it at every opportunity one got. I mean, I was in class 7th and had already mastered differential calculus. What do you expect? That was until Mrs. T came along. She was new to our school, and a perfect target for me. I tried my shenanigans on her in front of the whole class. She didn't scold me. She just smiled. At the end of the class, she called me aside and said the following words. I know that there is an unspoken assumption that a teacher is supposed to be more knowledgeable than the student. We both know that that assumption is wrong. I know for a fact that you know much more than me. And I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But remember this. Knowledge is supposed to give you power, not pride. Today, you are the smartest person in the room, tomorrow you won't be. There would always be someone much smarter, much more diligent than you. And when that happens, all the pride in the world wouldn't be enough to save you from downfall. Everything that you have learned will all be for nothing if you don't learn the lesson of humility. I still remember her words. Verbatim. I remind myself of them daily. And she was right. Had I not learnt the lesson of humility? I was 15 years old and sitting in social studies class. A Palestinian boy had just been shot in Israel and the class was discussing it. The discussion became an argument and the argument became a heated argument, and then someone said something that they probably shouldn't have. Our teacher thought for a moment and then said, "Class, I want you to try an experiment. I want you not to use the word hate for a whole week." It was hard, but I did it. At the end of the week I told him and his response was, "Good, now let's see if you can keep that streak going." It's been 22 years. It's been. Until this very moment, in fact. I was in my 7th grade health class and the teacher asked, "What is the speed of a nerve impulse when it travels to the brain?" I had read an article about that at one time and the teacher asked me, "What is your answer?" I replied, 4 miles per hour. The whole class erupted in laughter and derision. I thought I was correct in my answer, but after everyone in the class did that, I lost some of my confidence. The teacher then began asking other members of the class what they thought the speed was, and the answers came back extremely high, like the speed of light, the speed of sound, twice the speed of sound, and other answers like 1,000 miles an hour. The teachers then asked me if I wanted to change my answer and I replied no. The teacher said the answer is 4.5 miles per hour. He then asked me how I knew the answer to that question and I told him that I had read it somewhere, except I had forgotten about the half-mile part. It was a glorious moment when the whole class was wrong and only the teacher and myself knew the answer. However, I have researched this on the internet since then, and the speed of the impulse varies by the type of impulse. The speed can vary from 4.5 to 250 miles an hour. So, everyone in the class was incorrect, including my teacher and myself. I hate you. This from my high school biology teacher when I pointed out the kidney she was showing us was an ovary. She and I had a sort of friendly relationship. She was also one of those people who says things the opposite of what she means. Ms. Abel was my favorite teacher, and the one who re-taught me English after my first ECT session. We're doing swearing. In French. This was especially notable, because we were supposed to study Norwegian that lesson, not French, and none of us had even signed up to learn French at all. I suppose a little background is necessary. It was in the middle of high school, and our ordinary teacher had just had a son and consequently was out of commission on account of paternity leave. John Tolas, a poet, teacher and writer with books under his belt on topics as diverse as interpretation of dreams, and Old Norse poems that traditionally were written around the rim of beer bowls, was our replacement for the month. John walked into class on the first day and explained, "I was assigned to teach you Norwegian this month. But the way I see it, you all know Norwegian pretty well already, and I can't possibly make much of a difference to that in a month. We're doing swearing. In French. That way, if you ever go to France, you'll at the very least know when to duck." Having said all this, he turned to the blackboard and started writing up some basic French swearing. The class just sat there in silence, staring at him in a mixture of incomprehension and disbelief. He wrote for quite some time before turning to the class again. "Are you guys not taking notes? There'll be a test at the end of it." And that said, he then proceeded to do his utmost to teach us French swearing. We learnt merde, and vate, faire foutre and fils de pute, salade and zut and incular and a whole lot more. All of it taught in a concentrated, serious, factual manner with reading, writing, and practical exercises where, so he claimed, we'd score extra points if we managed to make him blush. At the end of it, the last day before our regular teacher came back, there was a written test. I'm proud to report I scored an A. He then subsequently insisted to our regular teacher that our grade in French swearing be included as part of our Norwegian grade. He was a marvelous character and a good teacher. People would deliberately pick subjects in such a manner as to increase their odds of getting him as a teacher. And you know what? I don't remember what I learned the following weeks, after our regular teacher came back. But I still know when to duck when visiting France. I was quite a good chemistry student back in the day. But then, during 12th grade, with the board exams looming large over everyone's heads like a scary Shinigami, something happened and I started losing my way. It wasn't girls. Nor was it booze or drugs. I don't know what it was, but I had just lost my drive to do well. My grades dropped remarkably from the high 90s to the low 70s and even the 60s, taking everyone at school and at home by horror. These weren't the scores of a school topper. Well, it was January, barely 2 months before our board exams, and our chemistry teacher, Mrs. Swati Sarma, was handing out our pre-board answer sheets. Adifir, 74, Abhinanda, 87, Mrinmoy, 54, Akil, 92. Samvit, 71. Fuck, again. So, I walked up to my teacher, who had that, "Come on, man. Just tell me what's happening with you," look on her face. But, she just smiled as she handed me my answer sheet. I hung my head in shame. Not a word was spoken. I took my paper. On the top right corner she had written and circled 71/100 in large fonts and red ink. And below that, in a smaller font, she had scribbled something. I guessed it might have been on the lines of, "very bad," or "pathetic," or "we expected more," or something of the sort. I was about to flip the page over to see where I had screwed up in the test, when the name Sir C.V. Raman written in red, caught my eye. Now that prompted me to inspect what Mrs. Sarma had scribbled. She had written, "Someday, Samvit, I hope me and billions of Indians take your name in the same breath as Sir C.V. Raman, S. Chandrasekhar, and Satyendranath Bose. You do have it in you." That's all she wrote. That was all she needed to write. The message came across crisp, loud, and clear and was like a kick in my balls. I don't know how many times I might have read it and reread it. There was a large lump in my throat, and if my benchmate hadn't elbowed me, I'm certain, tears would have flown. I got my shit together and over the next few months worked like I was possessed by the ghosts of Raman, Chandrasekhar, et al. And did well in my boards. I scored 93 in chemistry. I'll never forget the hug she gave me on results day. "Thank you, ma'am," was all I was able to say. I had to return my paper and we didn't have mobile phones in school back then, let alone phone cameras, and I couldn't take a picture. I guess I didn't need to. The message was so profound, and so deep, that image of 71/100 written and circled in red on the top right corner of my answer sheet, and those priceless words scribbled below have been embedded in me forever. That Cat Stevens was full of crap. When I was in 8th grade we learned about eclipses. When we talked about solar eclipses, the teacher said that you are in the moon's shadow, but that these eclipses are rare and you have to be in exactly the right area to see it. And then he said, so yeah, that Cat Stevens was full of crap. Cat Stevens, Moon Shadow, 1970. My dad was a big fan of rock and roll, so even though Cat Stevens is before my time, I'd heard this song many times and got the joke. If you don't get the joke, listen to the lyrics. I laughed, but literally no one else did. This was 1989, so New Kids on the Block was what was playing on the radio. The teacher looked at me and smirked. One kid had gotten his joke. It made me feel special to be in on it, to be as smart as an adult. I never forgot that, and I try to make my own students feel like that whenever possible. Every once in a while I get the chance, and it's so cool when a kid chuckles and everyone looks at him or her like, what's funny? Plenty of teachers have said more meaningful and intelligent things than this, but I picked this one because making students feel smart is a great way to get them to work hard, love school, and eventually be smart.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future also. Don't forget to like and subscribe to you never miss a video.